And I'll move on to the spiritual message today. And this is called, the title is called, And It Came to Pass. Okay. So this month, as you all know, we're looking at the idea of the circle of life, knowing that the circle, the cycle, is an ongoing series of beginnings and endings, openings and closings, hellos, goodbyes, and yes, even births and deaths. And as I've stressed each week, there's something very important that we need to remember about this circle. It is not static. It does not loop back upon itself. Rather, it's ever expanding, ever transcending, and ever growing outward and upward. So it's always getting bigger, right? Or in the words of Dr. Ernest Holmes, this is in The Science of Mind, page 387, the spiral of life is upward. Eternal and progressive expansion is its law, and there are no breaks in its continuity. So each month, or each Sunday this month, inspired by the lessons of The Lion King, which, a Disney movie, I know, we are exploring this upward spiral of life. Specifically today, we're going to look at the downward arc of the circle of life, the places where we feel like closings, goodbyes, endings, deaths, not really the stuff we really want to focus on, but remember, we're not staying there. These places can be dark and scary when we do encounter them. When we're in these places, we might feel like we've lost our way. When we're in that portion of the circle, we may feel as if we're going to be there forever. Have you ever thought that? Oh my gosh, it's always going to be like this. Our hero in The Lion King, Simba, a cute little tiger cub, certainly found himself there. Because of some tragic events, he had left his home and his family, and he forgot. Well, really, he denied rather than forgot that he was the rightful king of Pride Rock. He wandered for quite some time, not fulfilling his life's purpose. But eventually, as we know, the shamanic figure, Rafiki, the baboon, came to him to help him remember, first, who he is, and second, his rightful place. And during this time of wandering, during the dark night of his soul, Simba's deceased father, Mufasa, came to him in a vision and said the most amazing line. Imagine the rich, deep voice of James Earl Jones, right? Isn't he wonderful? Simba, you have forgotten who you are. You are more than what you have become. You must take your place in the circle of life. And of course, we've explored in the past weeks what it means to take our place and how important it is. And I realized something else. We saw a movie Friday, Beautiful Creatures, and Jeremy Irons is in that. And I'm listening, and I'm going, man, I know that voice. He's the voice of Scar. He's the brother. It's like, oh man, you know, these people with their voices that are so just amazing. They stick with you through every movie. Yes, pretty amazing. So back to the idea that you are more than you have become, and you must take your place in the circle of life is going to become our mantra for when we are in that downward arc of the circle. But we'll make it personal, and we're going to adjust it slightly. I am more than where I am right now. I can take my place in the circle of life. So let's say that together. I am more than where I am right now. I can take my place in the circle of life. Wow. This morning, my desire is to assist you in getting a new perspective of this downward arc on the infinite circle. First, by finding the blessings that it has to offer, because we know that that's where a lot of our blessings are found, and by realizing that it did not come to stay forever. It came, in fact, to pass. So first I want to talk about finding the blessing. I know I often talk about looking for the good, finding the blessing in every situation, and you may have thought right now, oh, ho hum, here we go again. But I want to give you two thoughts this morning that are a bit different from the idea of simply looking for the good in a specific, not so good situation. Although that is always a powerful, really powerful thing to do. You know, if you can pull yourself and separate and look at it for, I know there's something good here, right, Suzanne? Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about is following the true light. Several years ago, one of the daily meditations in the Science of Mind magazine contained a wonderful metaphor that I've really never forgotten. I think mostly because my mother was very much attached to hummingbirds. So when I read this, I thought of my mom. The author of the article had a window next to her computer that looked out on a skylight over an overhanging roof. And as she looked out one day, she saw a hummingbird trapped under the skylight. It had flown under the roof and then to the light of the skylight and was trying to get out via the skylight. Obviously, it couldn't succeed, could it? Because it kept hitting the glass. As she sat and watched the struggle, her intuition told her that this creature of God would instinctively go to the true source of light beyond the roof and thus be set free if she could cut off the appearance of the false exit by covering the skylight. So she pursued this aha by getting a ladder and a cloth and covering the skylight. The bird was free by the time she got off the ladder. That's how quickly that happened. She wrote, "This incident caused me to ask myself what happens in my life when I have been following a false light. And I realized that some kind of dark night of the soul often occurred. In that moment, I gave thanks for my dark night of the soul because it is an indication for me to take another path to the light. I then followed the truth of being well connected. God is my light, and my connection with this truth cannot be broken." So being in that downward arc, the dark place, may be because you have allowed yourself to get off track, to veer from your spiritual center. Life circumstances may have hit you hard, or you may have simply gotten wrapped up in life and let God fall by the wayside. It happens, We get out of the habit of meditating, right? We get out of the habit of putting God first in everything. We get busy with life. It happens. We're human. Don't beat yourself up over it. I hear ministers talk about this all the time, and other ministers say, remember you're human first. And so it's just what we do. And then we remember who we are, and we get back on track. A blessing of the downward arc is that it is a messenger for you, perhaps as Reverend Sandy was experiencing. A messenger that says, wake up, find that true light again. And of course, once you do that, you begin to move into the upward portion of the circle once again. The second thought I want to share is something called chemicalization. And I've talked about this before. Do you remember me talking about chemicalization? Okay. This is something that might be going on for you when you first find yourself in that downward arc of the circle. And it's also really, truly a great blessing. Let me describe a scenario and see if any of you have ever experienced it. You have an awakening and you're beginning to look at life differently. You begin to think differently, affirmatively. You've begun to have a whole new relationship with God. Perhaps you started coming to this church or, seeking out other places that teach the spirituality, reading more books, taking classes, that kind of thing. And things really start to click. I know this happened for Rich and me when we first discovered this church in Whittier. Oh my goodness, we realized we had this power. We were treating. We were getting demonstrations. It was just clicking. It was just amazing. It was wonderful. Life was improving. It was fantastic. Or perhaps you're not new to the truth teachings, but you're taking steps to go deeper with it, and perhaps taking some of our more advanced classes, like we'll be teaching with the Essence of Ernest Holmes. And again, things are really shifting in a delightful and wonderful way for you. But then all of a sudden, you hit a wall and it stops. No, it really more than just stops. It seems to go in reverse. I've heard stories of people treating for abundance, and abundance comes to them, and then they lose their wallet. What was that about? Or something, something happens. It doesn't just stop, it kind of goes in reverse. You become frightened and discouraged, doubting that anything had really changed for you. There's a book titled Your Aladdin's Lamp, and it's a great book about the beginning days of religious science, where Dr. Bill Hornaday, who was Ernest Holmes' protege, and we got to listen to him on the radio when we were in Whittier, was working with a New York cab driver. And I know I've shared this story before. The cab driver's name was Julius Potholz, and he had the worst case of negative thinking ever. ever that Hornaday had ever encountered. But through Hornaday's counsel and some willingness on Julius's part, he started changing the way he thought, turning all of his negatives into positives, and his life really turned around. The ending scene of the story was Julius's wife coming to a Sunday service and Mrs. Potholes in tears, thanking Hornaday for the miracle he had worked on her husband. Hornaday gave her a word of warning. Sometimes after miraculous changes, things seem to slow down or stop, and it gets difficult again. Has anybody ever experienced that? I know I have. So you might ask, what's up with that? It's time to ask that.
What's up with that?
What's up with that? Well, in religious science, we don't have a name for it. But it's interesting because in Unity, our sister religion, they do. And it's called chemicalization. And this is the science part, which I absolutely love. Okay. And it's a natural part of the process of expansion and growth in consciousness. So what exactly is chemicalization? The chemical change that literally takes place in your thoughts and feelings, which is then reflected in your body and affairs. We know, don't we, that our mind and body is connected, that our thoughts, our attitudes, our beliefs actually have an effect on our cells and the actual physiological part of our being, right? So, does anybody question that your thoughts and attitudes have an effect on your body? No, we all agree with that? Okay. Catherine Ponder in her book, The Dynamic Law of Healing writes, when people have lived for years...
I'm reading that book.
Are you? Right now. She's reading it right now. When people have lived... Can I have an amen? No.
I have it. It's a great book.
It is a great book.
Years ago.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have all her books.
Catherine Ponder's amazing.
Okay.
When people have lived for years, this is what she writes, when people have lived for years in wrong thought, they have molded these negative notions into their bodies and affairs. Now they've begun to do an about-face thinking in terms of love, praise, forgiveness, release. Such reverse thoughts are a big dose for their system to take. And so there's a clash between the old and the new ways of thinking. This sets up a chemical reaction in the mind, body, and affairs. At such times, the good thing to remember is that one positive thought is more powerful than 1,000 rowdy, negative thoughts. The old way of thinking is on its way out no matter how much noise it makes in the process. It has to go. But having been in control for so long, it doesn't want to give up without a fight. Even while it's flaring up for you the last time, you can know that it is actually unconditionally surrendering and will soon be gone completely. Meanwhile, there seems to be a lot of excitement as it takes its last stand. Chemicalization sounds like a negative process, but it's actually a very positive and natural one. Now, we can add our own belief to how long this has to take, because I don't want to subscribe to any long battles going on within my system. I want to just know that...
Quickly and in peace.
Yes, and easily and effortlessly, and it's gone. So, but it is something that physiologically we are, physical beings. So, it could be that when you seem to be in a downward arc in your circle, circle of life, it is simply the natural, necessary, and very positive experience of chemicalization, which is a blessing. We need to look at it as a blessing. So, now on to it came to pass. It's important to remember that whatever's going on, wherever you are having an opportunity to find the true light, not the skylight, or wherever you are in the process of chemicalization, that this came to pass. How many times in the Bible do we read the phrase, and it came to pass? We really could take a good lesson from that phase. It came to pass. It didn't come to stay. It came to pass. Or, as one of my spiritual gurus, who I often quote, Dr. Tom Costa, founder of the Palm Desert Church of Religious Science, or Center for Spiritual Living now, always said, when you're going through hell, keep going. Don't stop and build a condo. What great counsel that is. I think he borrowed that, too. I don't know that. Yeah.
That's a country western song.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Before a black comedian said that, too. I don't remember.
Yeah. Can you play country western music? We do have a Scotty McCreery song.
Under duress.
Under duress. Maybe just once a year, right?
With a bottle of beer.
Jack Daniels. Okay. What great counsel that is for putting the downward arc of our circle in perspective. It came to pass. Perhaps take an attitude from the carpenter, as told in the story called The Trouble Tree. This is a lovely story found in the Chicken Soup for the Soul, volume 4, volume 4. The carpenter that I hired to help me restore an old farmhouse had just finished a rough first day on the job. A flat tire made him lose an hour of work. His electric saw quit, and now his ancient pickup truck refused to start. While I drove him home, he sat in stony silence. On arriving, he invited me in to meet his family. As we walked toward the front of the door, he paused briefly at a small tree, touching the tips of the branches with both hands. When opening the door, he underwent an amazing transformation. His tanned face was wreathed in smiles, and he hugged his 2 small children and gave his wife a kiss. Afterward, he walked me to the car. We passed the tree, and my curiosity got the better of me. I asked him about what I had seen him do earlier. "Oh, that's my trouble tree," he replied. "I know I can't help having troubles on the job sometimes, but one thing's for sure. Troubles don't belong in the house with my wife and children. So I just hang them up on the tree every night when I come home. Then in the morning, I pick them up again." "The funny thing is," he said as he smiled, "when I come out in the morning to pick them up, there aren't nearly as many as I remember hanging up the night before."
When I was really having some really tough times at work, we have a gate. So I would leave and I would visualize that gate closing, and I had to do that too. It was really just
Leave everything behind that gate.
behind that gate.
Yeah.
So why do you think that was? Why do you think there were less troubles when he came back out?
Because they weren't as bad as they thought in the first place.
And because they came to pass. They didn't come to stay. They came to
You didn't
pass.
dwell on them.
Things work
Right.
themselves out.
Yeah. We block our flow by thinking our dark moments have come to stay. We begin our movement in the circle of life again by realizing that they came to pass. And so, if you find yourself in that downward arc, experiencing a dark night of the soul, remember you are more than where you are right now. You can take your place in the circle of life. Ernest Holmes once wrote in the Holmes Reader on meaning, "We may meet difficulties, uncertainties and doubts, barriers walling our passage, but we must not be discouraged when so confronted. We must climb over the rocks of unbelief, pass around the barriers of doubt, and plunge into the stream with faith. The stream will ever widen. The barriers will gradually disappear. Though we walk through the plains and valleys of indecision and doubt, the stream will still carry us back to the ocean of our being." And so it is.
So